When my husband's family told me I wasn't family material and would never fit into their world, I thought my marriage was over. But what happened at Christmas dinner changed everything. My billionaire husband had been planning something that would shut them up forever, and when he revealed his surprise, even his ice-cold mother couldn't hide her shock. What he did next made me realize I'd married someone who would move mountains to protect the woman he loved. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The silk curtains in our Manhattan penthouse caught the December sunlight as I stared at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines. After 3 years of marriage to Marcus Wellington, I was finally carrying his child. My heart raced with joy, then immediately plummeted as I remembered his mother's words from last week's family dinner. "Face it, dear," Eleanor Wellington had said, her voice dripping with condescension as she sipped her imported wine. "You're simply not family material. Marcus needs a wife who can enhance the Wellington legacy, not diminish it." The memory stung fresh. I'd grown up in a cramped apartment above my father's auto repair shop in Detroit, worlds away from the marble floors and crystal chandeliers that defined Marcus's childhood. When we met at Northwestern University, he was just another student in my economics class. I had no idea his family owned half the commercial real estate in Chicago and had business interests spanning 3 continents. Marcus found me in our bedroom 20 minutes later, the test still clutched in my palm. His steel-gray eyes lit up when he saw my expression. "Stephanie? What is it?" I couldn't speak. I just held up the test. He was across the room in 2 strides, lifting me off my feet and spinning me around. "Are you serious? We're having a baby?" "I'm scared, Marcus," the words tumbled out. "Your family already thinks I'm not good enough for you. What are they going to say about this?" His face darkened. Marcus had spent the last 3 years trying to shield me from his family's subtle cruelty, but we both knew the truth. His father, Richard Wellington, treated me like an amusing novelty. His sister Victoria made snide comments about my quaint background whenever Marcus wasn't listening. And Eleanor? She'd made it her personal mission to convince her son he'd married beneath himself. "They'll come around," Marcus said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. This is their grandchild we're talking about. 2 weeks later, we sat in the Wellington family's private dining room in their Lake Forest estate. The table could seat 20, but tonight it was just the 5 of us. Marcus, me, his parents, and Victoria with her hedge fund manager husband. Preston Eleanor barely glanced up from her lobster bisque when Marcus cleared his throat to make his announcement. "Mother, Dad, we have some wonderful news. Stephanie and I are expecting our first child." The silence stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Richard set down his spoon with deliberate precision. Victoria's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose toward her hairline. Eleanor's face remained completely blank. "How unexpected?" Eleanor finally said, the word unexpected carrying the weight of deep disappointment. "Unexpected?" Marcus's voice took on an edge. "We've been married for 3 years. "Of course," Richard interjected smoothly. "Congratulations are in order." But his tone suggested he was offering condolences instead. Victoria leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the chandelier light. "I suppose we should start planning the nursery. Though I imagine you'll want something more, modest compared to what we had growing up." The barb hit its mark. My cheeks burned, but I kept my expression neutral. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Actually," he said carefully, "we were hoping the baby could be christened at St. Matthew's, where I was baptized. Family tradition." Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "St. Matthew's has very specific requirements for godparents. They prefer families with established social standing." "You mean they prefer families with old money?" I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since we'd arrived. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Eleanor's pale blue eyes fixed on me with laser precision. "I mean, they prefer families who understand the responsibilities that come with the Wellington name. This child will inherit a legacy that spans 4 generations. They'll need proper guidance, I repeated. From people who actually care about them, you mean? Preston shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Victoria shot him a warning look. Stephanie, Marcus said quietly, but I was done being quiet. No, Marcus. I think your mother is trying to say something, and I'd like to hear it clearly. Eleanor set down her silverware and folded her hands in her lap. Very well. Since you insist on directness, I'll be direct. This family has worked for generations to build something meaningful. We have responsibilities to shareholders, to employees, to our community. We need family members who understand those responsibilities and can shoulder them appropriately. And you don't think I can. I think you're a lovely girl with many admirable qualities. But this isn't about what I think. It's about what's best for the family, for the business, and now for this child. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt Marcus's hand find mine under the table, squeezing tight. What exactly are you suggesting, Mother? His voice was dangerously quiet. Eleanor's smile was razor thin. I'm suggesting that perhaps it's time to consider what kind of future you want for your child, and whether that future is best served by current arrangements. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. She wasn't just questioning my fitness as a mother. She was questioning whether Marcus should stay married to me at all. I think we should go, I said, starting to stand. Stephanie, sit down. Marcus's voice carried an authority I'd never heard before. Mother, I need you to clarify something for me. Are you suggesting I should divorce my wife? Richard cleared his throat. Son, no one's suggesting anything so drastic. But we do think you should consider what's in everyone's best interests. Everyone's best interests. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me tell you what's in my best interests. My wife is brilliant. She graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a double major in economics and international business. She speaks 3 languages fluently. She's transformed our charitable foundation's efficiency by 40% in 2 years. And she's carrying my child. Marcus, Eleanor began, but he cut her off. I'm not finished. Do you know what she did last month when the Henderson deal was falling apart? While I was stuck in meetings with our lawyers, Stephanie identified the real issue. A cultural miscommunication that everyone else had missed. She spent 6 hours on the phone with their team, speaking in Mandarin, and saved us a $12 million contract. I stared at him in surprise. I hadn't realized he'd known about that. But according to you, she's not family material, because her father fixes cars instead of owning banks. Marcus stood up, still holding my hand. Well, let me tell you something about family material. The family doesn't try to tear each other down. Family doesn't make the people you love feel unwelcome. And family sure as hell doesn't suggest you'd be better off without your pregnant wife. Eleanor's composed mask finally cracked. Marcus, you're being dramatic. Am I? Because it sounds like you just told me my wife isn't good enough for our family, and my child would be better off with different parents. I never said. You didn't have to say it directly. You've been saying it for 3 years. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to something. But since we're talking about family material, let me share something interesting I discovered last week. He held up his phone screen toward his parents. This is a private investigator's report about our family history, specifically about great-great-grandmother Margaret Wellington, the woman whose portrait hangs in the front hall. Richard's face went white. Victoria leaned forward, confused. Turns out Margaret wasn't born Margaret Ashford of the Boston Ashfords, like family legend claims. She was born Margaret O'Sullivan. Her father was a dock worker in South Boston. She worked in a textile factory until she married great-great-grandfather William. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. The silence was deafening. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. So according to your logic, Mother, our entire family legacy is built on someone who wasn't family material. Someone whose background was actually more humble than Stephanie's. Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket and straightened his tie. Stephanie and I are leaving now. When you're ready to apologize to my wife and welcome her properly into this family, you know where to find us. Until then, don't expect to see us at Sunday dinners. As we walked toward the door, Eleanor's voice stopped us. Marcus, wait. We turned back. For the first time in 3 years, Eleanor Wellington looked uncertain. Perhaps I spoke too hastily. Perhaps you did. Marcus's voice was ice cold. But words have consequences, Mother, and so do years of making my wife feel unwelcome in her own family. We left them sitting there in stunned silence. In the car, I finally let the tears fall. I can't believe you hired a private investigator to research your own family. Marcus reached over and took my hand. I didn't hire him to research the family. I hired him to research something else entirely. The family history was just a bonus discovery. What were you really investigating? He smiled, and for the first time in hours, it reached his eyes. Christmas is 3 weeks away, Stephanie, and I have a feeling this year is going to be very different from the others. The next morning, I woke up to find Marcus already dressed in one of his navy suits, his laptop open on the breakfast table. Spread around him were documents I didn't recognize, legal papers, financial statements, and what looked like architectural blueprints. You're up early, I said, pouring myself a cup of decaf coffee. The morning sickness hadn't hit yet, but I wasn't taking any chances. Couldn't sleep. He closed his laptop and gathered the papers into a neat stack. I kept thinking about what my mother said. About family material. Marcus, forget about it. Your family will never accept me, and I'm okay with that. We don't need their approval to raise our child. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking Central Park. But what if we did have it? What if there was a way to make them see you the way I see you? You can't force people to respect someone they've already decided to look down on. Maybe not. He turned back to me, and there was something different in his eyes. Something determined. But I can force them to confront their own hypocrisy. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. That was my assistant. The Singapore deal just hit a snag. I have to fly out tonight. My heart sank. Marcus traveled frequently for business, but the timing felt terrible. How long will you be gone? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But Stephanie... He crossed the room and cupped my face in his hands. I need you to trust me. While I'm gone, there might be some unusual things happening. Deliveries, phone calls, people asking questions. Just go along with it, okay? What kind of unusual things? The kind that is going to change everything. He kissed my forehead. I love you, and I'm going to prove to my family exactly what kind of woman they've been underestimating. Marcus left for Singapore that evening, and for the next few days, everything seemed normal. I went to my doctor's appointments, continued managing the charitable foundation, and tried not to think about the Wellington family dinner disaster. Then the deliveries started. The first was a massive bouquet of white orchids from an exclusive florist in the Upper East Side. The card simply read, "For the future, Mrs. Wellington." I was already Mrs. Wellington, so the message confused me. But before I could call Marcus to ask about it, a second delivery arrived. This time it was a team of interior designers from a company I'd never heard of, Harrington and Associates. Mrs. Wellington? The lead designer, a sharp-dressed woman named Catherine, consulted her tablet. We're here about the nursery consultation. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. We didn't schedule a nursery consultation, Catherine smiled. Your husband, Mr. Marcus Wellington, contacted us last month. He wanted us to present several design options for a baby's room. May we come in? Confused but curious, I let them in. For the next 2 hours, they transformed our spare bedroom into a showcase of 3 different nursery themes. One classic and elegant, one modern and minimalist, and one that took my breath away. The third option looked like something out of a fairy tale. Hand-painted murals covered the walls, depicting a magical forest with hidden animals and twinkling stars. The crib was a work of art, carved from what Catherine explained was sustainably sourced walnut wood. Every detail was perfect, from the vintage rocking chair upholstered in the softest cashmere to the custom bookshelf already filled with first-edition children's classics. This is beautiful, I whispered, running my fingers along the crib's intricate carvings. But it must cost... That's not for you to worry about, Catherine said gently. Your husband was very specific about his requirements. He said, and I quote, "My wife deserves something that shows everyone exactly how precious she and our child are to me." After they left, I tried calling Marcus, but his phone went straight to voicemail. The time difference meant he was probably in meetings. I left a message thanking him for the surprise but asking him to call me back. The next day brought another surprise. This time it was a lawyer from a firm I'd never heard of, Morrison, Beck and Associates. "Mrs. Wellington, I'm David Morrison. Your husband retained our services to handle some legal documentation. We need to discuss some property transfers and trust arrangements." We sat in Marcus's home office while Morrison spread out a series of documents on the mahogany desk. "I have to admit, I'm confused," I said. "What kind of property transfers?" Morrison adjusted his glasses and consulted his notes. "Your husband is establishing a trust fund for your unborn child. The initial funding amount is quite substantial, $50 million, but that's not the unusual part." "$50 million isn't the unusual part?" "No, ma'am. The unusual part is that he's also transferring ownership of several properties directly to you. His penthouse, for starters, the house in the Hamptons, the cabin in Aspen, and—" He paused, looking confused. "A 2,000-acre estate in northern Michigan that was apparently purchased 3 weeks ago." Michigan? Marcus bought property in Michigan? According to these documents, yes. It's near a town called Traverse City. The property includes a main house, guest houses, stables, and what appears to be a private airstrip. My head was spinning. Why would he buy property in Michigan without telling me? Morrison shrugged. "I'm just handling the legal paperwork, Mrs. Wellington. But I will say this. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen someone move this quickly to secure their spouse's financial independence. Whatever your husband is planning, he's making sure you and your child are protected no matter what happens." That evening, I finally managed to reach Marcus. It was early morning in Singapore and he sounded exhausted. "Stephanie, I got your messages. How are you feeling? Any morning sickness?" "Marcus, forget about morning sickness. What's going on? Interior designers, lawyers, property in Michigan? What aren't you telling me?" There was a long pause. "I told you to trust me." "I do trust you, but this is crazy. $50 million for the baby? Properties in my name? What's this all about?" "It's about making sure my family understands something very important," he said quietly. "You're not just some woman I married on a whim. You're my partner, my equal, and the mother of my child. And if they can't see that on their own, then I'm going to make it impossible for them to ignore. Marcus, you don't have to prove anything to them." "Yes, I do. Not for them, for you. And for our child. I'm tired of watching you pretend their opinions don't hurt. I'm tired of family dinners where you have to defend your right to exist in their world. I'm done with all of it." Before I could respond, I heard voices in the background. "I have to go," Marcus said. "But Stephanie, December 23rd, that's when everything changes. I need you to be ready." "Ready for what?" "To show my family exactly what they've been missing." The line went dead, and I was left staring at my phone, more confused than ever. 2 days later, Victoria called. We almost never spoke directly, so her name on my caller ID made my stomach clench. "Stephanie, it's Victoria. We need to talk." "About what?" "About what Marcus is doing." Mother is beside herself. "There are rumors flying around the country club about property purchases and trust funds. People are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "Questions about why Marcus is suddenly moving such large amounts of money around. Questions about whether something's wrong with the marriage. Questions about whether he's planning to leave the family business." I sank into the living room couch, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. "I don't know anything about him leaving the business. Don't you? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like he's setting up some kind of exit strategy. And Mother thinks—" Victoria paused. "Mother thinks you put him up to it." "That's ridiculous, is it? You have to admit the timing is suspicious. You announce you're pregnant, have a fight with the family, and suddenly Marcus is restructuring his entire financial portfolio. Victoria, I don't know what Marcus is planning, but whatever it is, it has nothing to do with me manipulating him. Then what does it have to do with?" I thought about Marcus's words on the phone. About making his family understand something important. About December 23rd, I think, I said slowly. It has to do with love, and with respect, and by proving that sometimes the people you underestimate are exactly the ones who deserve your attention. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Stephanie, whatever game you think you're playing, I'm not playing a game, Victoria. But maybe your family should start considering that Marcus isn't either. After I hung up, I walked to the spare bedroom where the fairy tale nursery waited. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows made the painted forest seem to shimmer with life. I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered to the tiny life growing inside me. Your daddy is planning something big, little one, and I have a feeling Christmas this year is going to be unforgettable. Marcus returned from Singapore on December 20th, and I barely recognized the man who walked through our front door. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made me nervous. How did the Singapore deal go? I asked as he dropped his briefcase and pulled me into his arms. Better than expected. He buried his face in my neck and breathed deeply. God, I missed you. How are you feeling? Any morning sickness? A little, but nothing serious yet. Marcus, we need to talk about the Michigan property, the trust fund, the lawyers. He pulled back and cupped my face. I know, and I promise I'll explain everything. But first I need to know, are you free tomorrow? Tomorrow? It's December 21st. Why? His smile was mysterious. Because we're taking a trip. Pack warm clothes and bring your passport. My passport? Marcus, where are we going? Somewhere that's going to change everything between us and my family. Forever. The next morning, a black SUV picked us up at 6 a.m. Instead of heading to JFK or LaGuardia, we drove to a private airfield in Westchester. A sleek corporate jet waited on the tarmac, and my confusion deepened when I saw the pilot, a woman who looked like she belonged in the military rather than flying corporate executives. Mrs. Wellington, she said with a crisp salute. Captain Sarah Mitchell, I'll be your pilot today. Where exactly are we flying to? I asked as we boarded. Marcus settled into the leather seat beside me and took my hand. Michigan. Specifically to that property David Morrison mentioned. The 2,000-acre estate? Marcus, why do you own 2,000 acres in Michigan? Because, he said as the plane began to taxi, 3 months ago, I discovered something about my family's business practices that made me realize I needed an exit strategy. And because I wanted to give you something that was completely ours, somewhere we could build our own legacy. The flight to Michigan took 2 hours, and Marcus spent most of it on his laptop, making what sounded like final preparations for something big. I caught fragments of his conversations, mentions of permits, construction crews, and something about media coordination. We landed on a private airstrip surrounded by snow-covered pine trees. The December air was crisp and clean, so different from the exhaust-filled atmosphere of Manhattan. A Range Rover waited for us, driven by a man who introduced himself as James, the property manager. Welcome to Evergreen Ridge. Mrs. Wellington? James said as we drove through wrought iron gates that looked like they belonged at a European estate. Mr. Wellington asked me to have everything ready for your arrival. As we crested a hill, my breath caught in my throat. Spread out before us was the most beautiful property I'd ever seen. A massive log and stone house sat at the center, looking like a luxury hunting lodge from a magazine. Smaller buildings dotted the landscape, guest houses, stables, what looked like a workshop, and in the distance, a frozen lake that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Marcus, I whispered, this is incredible, but I still don't understand why. Look closer, he said, pointing toward the main house. As we got nearer, I could see people moving around the property. Dozens of them. Some were carrying equipment, others were setting up what looked like outdoor heaters and lighting. A catering truck was parked near the side entrance. What's all this for? Marcus's smile was enigmatic. Christmas Eve dinner. Tomorrow night. Christmas Eve dinner for who? For my family. And for about 50 other very important people. My stomach dropped. Marcus, please tell me you didn't invite your parents here for some kind of surprise confrontation. That's not going to work. Oh, I didn't invite them. He helped me out of the car and led me toward the main house. They have no idea this place exists, or that we're here, or what I've been planning for the past 3 months. The interior of the house was even more stunning than the outside. Vaulted ceilings with exposed beams, massive stone fireplaces, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the forest. But what caught my attention were the photographers and camera crews setting up equipment in the main living room. Marcus, what is going on? He led me to a quiet corner and sat me down on a leather couch that probably cost more than most people's cars. Do you remember when I told you I hired a private investigator? The one who discovered the truth about our family's origins? Yes, but you said that was just a bonus discovery. What were you really investigating? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a series of emails and documents. I was investigating my father's business practices, specifically some questionable real estate deals in Chicago that were pushing low-income families out of their homes. My blood ran cold. What kind of deals? The kind where city officials get paid to rezone neighborhoods, where elderly residents get pressured into selling for a fraction of their property's worth, where families who've lived somewhere for generations suddenly can't afford their own homes anymore. Oh my God. Marcus, that's illegal? Probably not technically, but definitely unethical. And definitely not the kind of legacy I want to pass on to our child. He scrolled through more documents. It gets worse. The profits from these deals have been funneled into shell companies that my father uses to avoid taxes. We're talking about millions of dollars, Stephanie. Millions that should have gone to community development, to schools, to helping the very people his business practices have displaced. I felt sick, and not from morning sickness. Does your mother know? She signs the checks. She absolutely knows. So what are you going to do? Marcus stood up and walked to the window overlooking the forest. Tomorrow night, I'm hosting a Christmas Eve dinner that's going to be live-streamed to over 1 million people. The guest list includes investigative journalists, city officials from Chicago, representatives from 3 different housing advocacy groups, and the families who've been affected by my father's business practices. And your parents? Will be watching from their living room in Lake Forest, along with everyone else they know, as I publicly announce that I'm severing all ties with Wellington Real Estate and donating my entire inheritance, approximately $200 million, to a foundation that will help displaced families buy back their homes. I stared at him in shock. Marcus, you can't give away $200 million. Actually, I can. And I already have the paperwork drawn up. He turned back to me, his expression serious but determined. But I'm not doing it alone. The foundation is being established in both our names, and you're going to be the one running it. Me? Marcus, I can't run a $200 million foundation. You transformed our existing foundation's efficiency by 40% in 2 years. You identified the cultural issues that saved us the Henderson deal. You have a double major in economics and international business, and you speak 3 languages. If anyone can do this, it's you. I felt overwhelmed. But your family's business, won't this destroy it? The parts that deserve to be destroyed, yes. The parts that are legitimate will survive under new management. But I'm done being part of something that hurts people. Before I could respond, James appeared in the doorway. Mr. Wellington, the advance team from Chicago just arrived. They're asking about final security arrangements. Security? I looked between Marcus and James. Why do we need security? Marcus's expression darkened slightly. Because when my family realizes what's happening tomorrow night, they're going to be furious. And when $200 million and a family's reputation are at stake, people sometimes make poor decisions. As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his jaw tightened. It's Victoria, he said. They must have figured out we're not in New York. He answered the call and put it on speaker. Marcus, where the hell are you? Victoria's voice was shrill with panic. Mother tried calling you 6 times today. We have the Anderson Christmas party tonight and you and Stephanie are supposed to be there. Sorry, Victoria. We had other plans. Other plans? What other plans? And why are there reporters calling the house asking about Wellington Real Estate and some kind of statement you're planning to make? Marcus looked at me and smiled. Because, sister dear, Tomorrow night, I'm going to show everyone exactly what family material really looks like. And it has nothing to do with money, social standing, or looking down on people who work with their hands. Marcus, you're scaring me. What are you planning? I'm planning to tell the truth. About our family, about our business, and about the woman I married who has more integrity in her little finger than the rest of us have combined. Marcus, Victoria started. But he hung up. Immediately, his phone began ringing again. This time it was his father. Don't answer it, I said quietly. Not yet. Let me understand what we're really doing here before you burn every bridge back to your old life. Marcus silenced his phone and sat beside me again. Stephanie, I need you to know something. This isn't about proving them wrong or getting revenge. This is about building something better. For us, for our child, and for all the families my father's greed has hurt. I looked around the beautiful house, thought about the $200 million he was prepared to give away, and realized that my husband wasn't just defending my honor. He was redefining what it meant to be a Wellington. Okay, I said finally. Tell me exactly what happens tomorrow night. Christmas Eve morning arrived with fresh snowfall that blanketed Evergreen Ridge in pristine white. I woke up in the master bedroom of our Michigan estate to find Marcus already, dressed in dark jeans and a cable-knit sweater, more casual than I'd ever seen him for anything. Business-related, today's the day, he said, bringing me a cup of herbal tea. How are you feeling? Terrified, excited, and nauseous, though I wasn't sure if that last part was pregnancy hormones or pure anxiety. Like I'm about to watch my husband destroy his entire family legacy on live television. Not destroy it, Marcus corrected, sitting on the edge of the bed. Transform it. There's a difference. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the controlled chaos happening outside. Production crews were setting up cameras and lighting equipment throughout the property. A team of caterers worked under large white tents, preparing for what Marcus had described as the most expensive dinner party with the worst possible outcome for the hosts. Marcus, I need you to walk me through tonight one more time, because once this live stream starts, there's no going back. He pulled out his tablet and showed me a detailed timeline. At 6 p.m., the live stream begins. We'll start with what looks like a normal Christmas Eve dinner party. Our guests will include the Hendricks family. They lost their home in Chicago when Dad's company bought their building and tripled the rent. The Ramirez family, their grocery store was demolished to make way for luxury condos they could never afford. About 12 other families with similar stories. And the journalists? Jennifer Walsh from the Chicago Tribune, David Chen from the Washington Post, and Maria Santos from Univision. Plus a documentary crew that's been following the displacement story for 6 months. I felt my stomach clench. Your parents are going to be watching this? Along with everyone they know. Victoria confirmed last night that the family will be gathered at Mother and Dad's house for their traditional Christmas Eve party. About 40 of Chicago's most prominent families will be there. Marcus, this is social suicide. For them, maybe. For us. He smiled and placed his hand on my still flat stomach. This is liberation. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the bedroom door. James entered with his usual professional demeanor, but I could see tension around his eyes. Mr. Wellington, we have a situation. Your father's security team arrived about an hour ago. They're parked at the main gate, and they're not leaving. Marcus's expression darkened. How many people? 4 SUVs. Maybe 12 men. They're not trying to enter the property, but they're definitely conducting surveillance. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Michigan winter. Marcus, maybe we should postpone this. If your father is willing to send security teams, then that proves how desperate he's becoming. Marcus stood and straightened his sweater. James, increase our own security presence, and make sure all the journalists and families have safe passage to the house. Already handled, sir. After James left, I grabbed Marcus's arm. What aren't you telling me about your father? Why would he send security teams to intimidate us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the snow-covered pine trees. Because the Chicago housing situation isn't the only illegal thing Wellington real estate has been involved in. It's just the one I can prove without anyone getting hurt. What else is there? Let's just say that when you're moving the kind of money my father moves, you sometimes end up with business partners who don't like publicity. Partners who have a lot to lose if certain financial arrangements become public knowledge. I sank back onto the bed, overwhelmed. Marcus, you're not just exposing your father's unethical business practices. You're potentially exposing organized crime connections. Which is exactly why we have our own security team here, and why the FBI has been briefed on tonight's event. The FBI? Agent Rebecca Torres. She's been investigating financial crimes in Chicago real estate for 2 years. Tonight's announcement will provide her with the evidence she needs to move forward with federal charges. I stared at my husband, this man I thought I knew, and realized he'd been planning something far more complex and dangerous than I'd ever imagined. Marcus, what if something goes wrong? What if your father's people try to stop this? He sat beside me and took my hands. Then we'll deal with it. Together. But Stephanie, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about proving to my family that you're good enough for me. This is about proving to our child that their parents stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. At 4 p.m., I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, trying to decide what one wears to destroy a family empire. I'd settled on a deep green dress that Marcus had bought for me in Singapore. Elegant, but not flashy. Sophisticated, but approachable. The kind of outfit that said, I belong here without screaming for attention. Marcus appeared behind me in the mirror, now dressed in a charcoal gray suit that somehow managed to look both formal and rebellious. You look beautiful, he said, but his reflection looked tense. You look like you're about to commit corporate warfare. Because I am. Downstairs, the transformation of the house was complete. The main living room had been set up for the live stream, with professional lighting that made everything look warm and inviting. The dining room table seated 24 people and was set with china that probably cost more than most people's cars. But what struck me most was the guest list. The families Marcus had invited weren't what you'd expect at a Wellington gathering. Maria Hendricks wore a dress from Target and kept nervously adjusting her sleeves. Miguel Ramirez had calloused hands from construction work and kept checking his watch like he was afraid he was late for something important. These were real people with real stories, not the polished socialites who usually attended Wellington events. But scattered among them were the journalists, and their presence changed everything. Jennifer Walsh from the Chicago Tribune looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, but her notebook was already out. David Chen was quietly setting up a recording device. The documentary crew moved through the room like ghosts, capturing everything. At 5:30, Marcus's phone rang. We both knew who it was before he looked at the caller ID. It's Mother. Answer it, I said, but put it on speaker. I want to hear this. Marcus accepted the call and Eleanor's voice filled the room, cold and controlled as always. Marcus, I don't know what kind of publicity stunt you think you're planning, but it ends now. Hello, Mother. Merry Christmas Eve to you too. Don't be glib with me. We know you have journalists there. We know you've invited those people to some kind of event. What exactly do you think you're accomplishing? I'm accomplishing something you taught me never to do, Mother. I'm telling the truth. The truth? Eleanor's laugh was bitter. The truth is that you're about to destroy 4 generations of family legacy for what? To prove a point about your unsuitable wife? I felt the familiar sting of her words, but this time, instead of hurt, I felt something else. Pity. This woman was about to lose everything because she couldn't see past her own prejudices. The truth, Marcus said calmly, is that our family legacy is built on stealing homes from families who can't fight back. The truth is that Dad has been hiding millions in offshore accounts while people lose their homes. And the truth is that in 30 minutes, the entire world is going to know exactly what kind of people the Wellingtons really are. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Eleanor's voice, smaller and more fragile than I'd ever heard it. Marcus, please. Think about what you're doing. Think about your inheritance. Think about your future. I am thinking about my future, Mother, and my child's future, and I've decided that some legacies aren't worth inheriting. He ended the call and turned to face the room full of guests. Journalists and camera crews. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made peace with his decision. It's time to begin. As the live stream went live, connecting us to viewers around the world, I realized that Marcus hadn't just been defending my honor for the past 3 months. He'd been planning a revolution. And now, with cameras rolling and his family watching from their Lake Forest mansion, there was no turning back. The war for the Wellington legacy was about to begin. The red recording light blinked on at exactly 6 p.m., and suddenly our intimate dinner party was connected to over 800,000 viewers worldwide. Marcus had somehow managed to get the stream featured on multiple platforms simultaneously: Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and even a partnership with CNN's digital division. "Good evening," Marcus said, standing at the head of the elegant dining table. "My name is Marcus Wellington, and tonight, my wife Stephanie and I want to share our Christmas Eve dinner with you, along with some very special guests." The camera panned across the faces around the table. Maria Hendricks sat straight-backed in her Target dress, her dignity intact despite the circumstances that brought her here. Miguel Ramirez had his arm around his teenage daughter Carmen, who kept staring at the opulent surroundings with wide eyes. These weren't the usual guests at Wellington gatherings, and Marcus made no attempt to hide that fact. "Before we begin our meal, I want to tell you a story," Marcus continued, and I could see the view counter climbing rapidly on the monitor James had set up discreetly in the corner. "It's a story about family, about legacy, and about what happens when you discover that everything you thought you knew about your own name was built on other people's pain." I watched the live comments flowing across the screen. Most viewers had tuned in expecting some kind of celebrity lifestyle content, a billionaire's lavish Christmas party. They had no idea they were about to witness a family destroy itself on live television. Marcus began with the Hendricks family. "Maria, would you tell our viewers about your home in Chicago? The one you lived in for 15 years? Maria's voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "We lived in a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park. My late husband bought it in 2008, right after we got married. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Our 3 children took their first steps in that living room. And what happened to that home? In 2023, Wellington Real Estate bought our building. Within 6 months, they'd raised our rent from $2,800 to $8,500 per month. When we couldn't pay, they started eviction proceedings. By Christmas last year, we were living in my sister's basement in Cicero." The live comments exploded. Viewers who'd expected holiday luxury content were instead getting a front row seat to a story of corporate displacement. I could see the view count approaching 1 million. "Miguel," Marcus said, turning to the construction worker who'd been nervously adjusting his tie all evening. "Tell us about your grocery store." Miguel's English was accented but clear. "Ramirez Market served the community for 12 years. My father started it with money he saved working 2 jobs. When Wellington Real Estate bought our block, they told us we could stay if we paid triple rent for a 5-year lease. $2,400 a month became $7,200. And when you couldn't pay, they demolished the building 6 months later. Now there's luxury condos starting at $500,000. None of my old customers can afford to live there anymore." I watched Marcus work the room like the skilled businessman he was, but instead of selling investment opportunities, he was selling the truth. Each family shared their story, and with each testimony, the weight of the Wellington name grew heavier. Then Marcus dropped the first bombshell. My father, Richard Wellington, built his fortune on exactly these kinds of deals. But what makes it worse is how he hid the profits. Marcus pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through financial documents. Wellington Real Estate has been funneling money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands for over a decade. We're talking about $47 million in avoided taxes, money that should have gone to Chicago schools, to infrastructure, to the very communities his business practices destroyed. The live comments went crazy. Financial journalists in the chat were asking for document verification. Local Chicago news outlets were requesting copies of the evidence. This was no longer just a family drama. It was a breaking news story unfolding in real time. But Marcus wasn't finished. However, tax avoidance is just the beginning, he said, and his voice took on a harder edge. 2 months ago, I discovered that my father has been laundering money for criminal organizations through his real estate transactions. Cash purchases of luxury properties, immediate resales at inflated prices, with the profits flowing back to organized crime families. The room went dead silent. Even the production crew stopped moving. This wasn't just about displaced families anymore. Marcus was alleging federal crimes on live television. Jennifer Walsh from the Chicago Tribune leaned forward. "Mr. Wellington, those are serious accusations. Do you have evidence to support these claims?" "I do." Marcus gestured to James, who brought over a box of documents. Financial records, wire transfer receipts, recorded phone conversations, and emails between my father and associates of the Torino crime family. I've already provided copies to FBI agent Rebecca Torres, who is leading a federal investigation into money laundering in Chicago real estate. The view counter hit 1.5 million. This wasn't just viral, it was a phenomenon. Major news outlets were picking up the live stream. Twitter was exploding with Dark Wellington Files hashtags, but then something happened that changed everything. My phone began buzzing with text messages, then Marcus's phone, then James's phone. All at once, every phone in the room started chiming with notifications. Jennifer Walsh looked at her phone and her face went white. "Marcus, you need to see this." She turned her phone screen toward the camera. It was a live news feed from Chicago, showing the Lake Forest police station. The headline read, "Breaking. Richard Wellington arrested on federal money laundering charges." The room erupted. Our dinner guests started talking all at once. The journalists were frantically making phone calls. The documentary crew swung their cameras toward the news feed playing on Jennifer's phone, but Marcus just stood there, completely still, staring at the screen. "Marcus," I whispered, "did you know this was going to happen tonight?" "I knew it was going to happen soon," he said quietly. "Agent Torres told me they were close to making arrests, but I didn't know it would be during the live stream." David Chen from the Washington Post was suddenly standing beside us. "Marcus, this completely changes your story. You're not just exposing your father's crimes, you're providing testimony while he's being arrested for those same crimes." I felt the weight of what was happening crash down on me. This wasn't just Marcus standing up to his family. This was Marcus serving as a federal witness against his own father on live television. The view counter hit 2 million. Marcus's phone rang. Without looking at the caller ID, I knew it was Eleanor. "Answer it," Jennifer Walsh said. "Let us hear what she has to say now." Marcus hesitated, then accepted the call and put it on speaker. Eleanor's voice came through the phone, but it was nothing like the controlled, condescending tone I'd grown used to. She was crying. "Marcus, how could you do this? Your father is in handcuffs. There are FBI agents in our living room. Our guests are leaving. The media is camped outside our house. How could you destroy your own family?" For the first time all evening, Marcus's composure cracked slightly. "Mother, Dad destroyed our family the moment he decided that making money was more important than treating people with dignity. But he's your father." "And those families he displaced? They had fathers too. Children too. Dreams too." Marcus looked around the table at our guests, many of whom were crying as they watched a mother's heart break on live television. "The difference is, our family chose to profit from their pain." "Marcus, please." Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "Please tell me there's a way to fix this. Please tell me this isn't the end of everything." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the camera that was broadcasting this intimate moment of family destruction to millions of viewers around the world. "Mother," he said finally, "this isn't the end of everything. This is the beginning of something better. Something our child can be proud of. Your child?" Eleanor's voice changed, becoming sharp with desperate hope. "Marcus, is Stephanie—" "We're having a baby, Mother. Your first grandchild. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let them grow up thinking that wealth excuses cruelty, or that family loyalty means protecting criminals." The line went quiet except for Eleanor's soft crying. "I love you, Mother," Marcus said, "but I love justice more. And I love the future we're building more than the past we're leaving behind." He ended the call, and for a moment, the only sound in the room was the wind outside, and the quiet crying of both the families at our table and Eleanor Wellington in her Lake Forest mansion. The live stream counter showed 2.8 million viewers, but I wasn't thinking about the numbers anymore. I was thinking about the baby growing inside me and about the world Marcus was creating for them. A world where doing the right thing mattered more than protecting family secrets. Marcus looked directly into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back after a brief pause. When we return, I'm going to tell you about the $200 million foundation my wife and I are launching, and how every family sitting at this table is going to help us rebuild the communities that the Wellington name destroyed. As the live stream cut to a commercial break, I realized that Marcus hadn't just defended my honor. He'd redefined what it meant to be family material. And somehow, in the middle of destroying everything he'd inherited, he'd built something worth inheriting. During the commercial break, the atmosphere in our Michigan dining room was electric with tension and anticipation. The family sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Maria Hendricks kept wiping tears from her eyes, while Miguel Ramirez held his daughter's hand so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mr. Wellington," Carmen Ramirez said, her teenage voice cutting through the quiet. "Is your dad really going to jail?" Marcus knelt beside her chair, his expression gentle but serious. "Yes, Carmen. He's going to face consequences for the choices he made. Choices that hurt your family and many others." "Good," she said fiercely. "Maybe now other families won't lose their homes like we did." Jennifer Walsh was frantically typing on her laptop, filing what would become the biggest story of her career in real time. "Marcus, the Chicago Tribune wants to run a full investigation series based on tonight's revelations. Can you provide additional documentation?" "Everything I have will be made public through the Foundation's website by tomorrow morning," Marcus replied. "Transparency is the whole point." James appeared at Marcus's side, his expression tense. "Sir, we have a problem. The security team at the gate reports that several unmarked vehicles have joined your father's people. They're not law enforcement." I felt my blood run cold. "Marcus, if your father was working with organized crime, then they probably aren't happy about tonight's revelations," he finished grimly. "James, contact Agent Torres immediately. Tell her we may need federal protection." David Chen overheard our conversation. "Marcus, if there's a safety concern, maybe we should end the live stream now." "Absolutely not," Marcus said firmly. "We're not stopping because criminals are angry that their money laundering operation got exposed. That's exactly the kind of intimidation that's allowed this to continue for so long." The commercial break ended, and we were live again. The viewer count had exploded to over 3 million people. Major news networks were now carrying the feed simultaneously. This was no longer just a live stream. It was a historic moment. "Welcome back," Marcus said, settling into his chair at the head of the table. Before we were interrupted by some breaking news from Chicago, I was about to tell you about the future we're building from the ashes of the Wellington legacy. He gestured to me, and suddenly I realized I was expected to speak. To 3 million people. About running a foundation I'd learned about 3 days ago. "My wife, Stephanie, will be the executive director of the Wellington Community Restoration Foundation," Marcus continued. "Stephanie, tell our viewers about your vision." I stood on unsteady legs, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. When I woke up pregnant 3 weeks ago, I never imagined I'd be announcing a $200 million charitable foundation to a global audience on Christmas Eve. "When I married Marcus 3 years ago," I began, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "His family told me I wasn't family material. They said I didn't understand what it meant to carry the Wellington name." The live comments exploded with support. Viewers were posting stories of their own experiences with classism and rejection. "They were right about one thing," I continued. "I didn't understand what it meant to carry the Wellington name. Because I thought it meant attending charity galas and writing checks to feel better about inequality. I thought it meant having beautiful things while ignoring the ugly ways those things were acquired." I looked around the table at the families whose lives had been shattered by Wellington real estate, but sitting here, tonight with Maria, Miguel, Carmen, and the other families affected by Wellington business practices, I finally understand what the Wellington name should represent. It should represent justice. It should represent using privilege to lift others up, not tear them down. It should represent the courage to admit when your family is wrong and the strength to make it right. The viewer count hit 3.5 million. News outlets around the world were picking up the story. Wellington Foundation was trending globally on Twitter. The Wellington Community Restoration Foundation will have 3 primary missions, I said, gaining confidence with each word. First, we'll help displaced families buy back homes in the neighborhoods where they were forced out. We're not just giving handouts. We're providing low-interest loans, down payment assistance, and legal support to fight predatory landlords. Miguel Ramirez was crying now. You mean we could buy back our building? We mean we're going to help you rebuild Ramirez Market exactly where it used to be, Marcus said. Better than it was before. Second, I continued, we're establishing a legal defense fund for families facing displacement. Too many people lose their homes because they can't afford to fight eviction in court. That changes now. Maria Hendricks raised her hand tentatively. What about families who've already lost everything? Families like mine who've been homeless for months? That's our third mission, I said. Emergency housing assistance and job placement services. Maria, we're not just going to help you find a new home. We're going to help you find a home in the neighborhood where you want to live, with schools where you want your children to learn. The live comments were moving so fast they were impossible to read. Donations were pouring in from viewers around the world. Other billionaires were posting on social media, either condemning or supporting Marcus's actions. This was becoming a global conversation about wealth, responsibility, and family loyalty. But then Jennifer Walsh's phone rang, and her expression as she answered it made everyone in the room go quiet. Marcus, she said after ending the call. That was my editor at the Tribune. Victoria Wellington just held a press conference. Marcus's jaw tightened. What did she say? She's claiming that you've had a mental breakdown, that the stress of your wife's pregnancy has caused you to make irrational decisions. She's calling tonight's live stream the desperate actions of a man who needs psychological help, not media attention. I felt rage build in my chest like I'd never experienced before. Even now, even with Richard in handcuffs and their money laundering operation exposed, the Wellington family was trying to discredit Marcus by attacking his mental health. She also announced, Jennifer continued, that the family is seeking a conservatorship to prevent you from destroying the Wellington legacy through impulsive decisions. The room exploded. Our dinner guests began talking at once. The journalists started making frantic phone calls. The documentary crew swung their cameras toward us, capturing every moment of this unprecedented family war playing out on live television. But Marcus just smiled. It was cold and calculating, and for the first time, I saw exactly how ruthless he could be when protecting the people he loved. James, Marcus said calmly, please bring me the documents from the blue folder in my briefcase. As James left the room, Marcus turned to face the camera directly. Victoria Wellington just made a very interesting accusation, he said. She's claiming I'm mentally unstable and making irrational decisions. But I have something she doesn't know I have, James returned with a thick folder of documents. Marcus opened it and pulled out what looked like audio transcripts. 6 months ago, when I first started investigating our family's business practices, I began recording conversations with family members, not because I planned to use them, but because I wanted to make sure I was remembering things correctly. He held up a transcript. This is from a conversation I had with Victoria in September, where she explicitly acknowledged that our father was cutting corners on tenant displacement procedures and that she was worried about the legal implications of his methods. He pulled out another document. This is from a conversation with my mother in October, where she asked me not to dig too deep into Dad's business practices because some things are better left buried. Marcus looked directly into the camera, and I realized he'd been planning for this moment. The moment when his family would try to destroy his credibility to save themselves. Victoria, if you're watching this, and I know you are, understand something very clearly. I have documentation of every conversation, every meeting, every email where you and Mother knew exactly what Dad was doing and chose to stay silent. If you want to question my mental stability, we can have that conversation in federal court alongside Dad. The live stream chat was moving so fast it was just a blur of support and shock. The viewer count approached 4 million people. But here's what Victoria doesn't understand about family material. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. Real families don't throw each other under the bus to save face. The real family doesn't attack someone's mental health to avoid taking responsibility. And real families sure as hell don't try to silence the person telling the truth about criminal behavior. He stood up and walked to where I was sitting, placing his hand on my shoulder. My wife is carrying our first child. In 6 months, that baby is going to be born into a world where the Wellington name means something completely different than it did yesterday. It's going to mean courage. It's going to mean justice. It's going to mean that when your family is wrong, you have the strength to make it right. Marcus looked around the table at our guests, then back at the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, the Wellington Community Restoration Foundation officially launches tomorrow morning. Every family sitting at this table will be our first beneficiaries. But more importantly, they'll be our partners in rebuilding the communities that greed destroyed. The viewer count hit 4.2 million people, making it one of the most watched live streams in history. But I wasn't thinking about the numbers anymore. I was thinking about the baby growing inside me, and about the legacy Marcus was building for them. A legacy that had nothing to do with inherited wealth and everything to do with inherited values. As the cameras continued rolling, capturing this moment of transformation, I realized that Marcus had proven something important to his family. I was family material. But more than that, he'd proven that being family material meant being willing to tear down everything that was wrong to build something that was right. And tomorrow, we'd start building. 6 months later, I stood in the nursery at Evergreen Ridge, our Michigan estate that had become so much more than a refuge. The fairy tale forest painted on the walls seemed to shimmer in the late June sunlight streaming through the windows. My daughter, Emma Rose Wellington, slept peacefully in the hand-carved walnut crib, completely unaware that she'd been born into a world where her family name now meant something entirely different than it had the Christmas before. The contractor says the new Ramirez market will be ready for its grand opening next week, Marcus said, entering the nursery with his laptop and a cup of coffee. Even at 6 months old, Emma had learned to sleep through her father's video calls with foundation beneficiaries around the world. And the Henderson family? They close on their new house in Lincoln Park tomorrow, 3 blocks from where they used to live, but in a building they'll actually own this time. Marcus set down his laptop and moved to the window overlooking our property, where construction crews were putting finishing touches on the new Wellington Foundation headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We'd built our foundation's main offices on the same land where Marcus had planned to expose his family's crimes. Now, instead of being a location associated with destruction, Evergreen Ridge has become a symbol of renewal. Any word from Agent Torres about the trial? I asked, adjusting Emma's blanket. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. Richard's lawyers are still trying to work out a plea deal. But with all the evidence we provided, plus the testimony from the families, Torres says he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The Wellington money laundering trial had become a media sensation that lasted 4 months. Every day, families like the Hendricks and Ramirez testified about how Wellington real estate's practices had destroyed their lives. Marcus took the witness stand for 3 full days, methodically presenting evidence of his father's crimes while cameras captured every moment. But the moment that broke the internet was when Eleanor Wellington finally testified she'd spent 6 months refusing to speak to Marcus, refusing to acknowledge Emma's birth, and maintaining that her son had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. But when federal prosecutors offered her immunity in exchange for testimony, she broke down completely on the witness stand. I knew, she'd said, tears streaming down her face as she faced the courtroom full of displaced families. I knew what Richard was doing to these people, and I told myself it was just business. I told myself that if they couldn't afford to stay in their homes, that wasn't our problem. The video of Eleanor's testimony went viral within hours. Not because people enjoyed watching a wealthy woman's downfall, but because it captured something raw about how privilege can blind people to the harm they cause. "She called yesterday," Marcus said quietly, still staring out the window. I looked up from Emma's crib in surprise. "Eleanor called? What did she say?" "She wants to meet her granddaughter." The words hung in the air between us. For 6 months, Eleanor had maintained that we were dead to her. She'd told reporters that Marcus's actions had killed her son, that she'd rather have no grandchildren than acknowledge Emma's existence. "What did you tell her?" Marcus turned from the window, his expression conflicted. "I told her I'd talk to you about it." I picked up Emma, who was starting to fuss, and settled into the cashmere rocking chair that had been one of Marcus's first gifts for the nursery. As I began to nurse her, I thought about everything that had happened since that Christmas Eve. Livestream, the Wellington Community Restoration Foundation had helped 847 families buy back homes in the neighborhoods where they'd been displaced. We'd provided legal representation for 2,300 families fighting eviction. Our emergency housing program had sheltered over 400 homeless families while helping them get back on their feet. But the success stories weren't just numbers. Miguel Ramirez's rebuilt market had become a community gathering place that hosted financial literacy classes and job training programs. Maria Hendricks had used our small business loan program to open a daycare center for working parents in Lincoln Park. Carmen Ramirez had received a full scholarship to Northwestern University, Marcus's, and my alma mater, funded by the foundation. "You know what's funny?" I said, looking down at Emma's perfect little face. "Your mother spent 3 years telling me I wasn't family material. But look what we built when we stopped trying to meet her definition of family." Marcus sat on the arm of the rocking chair and stroked Emma's soft hair. "She's lost everything, Stephanie. Her husband is in federal prison. Victoria won't speak to her because she blames Eleanor for not stopping Richard earlier. Preston divorced Victoria last month because he couldn't handle the scandal affecting his hedge fund. She's completely alone. And whose fault is that?" "Hers," Marcus said without hesitation. "But Emma shouldn't have to pay the price for her grandmother's mistakes." Before I could respond, James appeared in the nursery doorway looking unusually flustered. "Sir." "Ma'am, we have an unexpected visitor at the main gate. Eleanor Wellington is here." Marcus and I looked at each other in shock. "She's here? Now?" "Yes, sir." "She's alone, driving what appears to be a 10-year-old Honda Civic. She says she needs to speak with you both, and she won't leave until she does." I thought about the Eleanor Wellington I'd known, the woman who had never been seen in public without designer clothes and a chauffeur-driven Mercedes. The idea of her driving an old Honda to our front door was almost surreal. "Let her in," I said, surprising myself. "But James?" "Have security stay close." 20 minutes later, Eleanor Wellington stood in our living room looking like a shadow of her former self. Her hair, always perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater that looked like they came from Target, the kind of store she used to make snide comments about me shopping at. "Stephanie," she said, and her voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. "Thank you for seeing me." "I'm not doing this for you," I said, holding Emma protectively against my chest. "I'm doing it for her." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears when she saw her granddaughter for the first time. "She's beautiful. She looks like Marcus when he was a baby." "What do you want, Mother?" Marcus's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the pain underneath. Eleanor sat down heavily on the couch, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. "I want to apologize. To both of you. For everything." "Apologize for what specifically?" I asked. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "For telling you that you weren't family material when you were more family material than any of us. For choosing money over morality. For standing by while Richard destroyed people's lives. For attacking your mental health when you tried to do the right thing. For missing the first 6 months of my granddaughter's life because I was too proud to admit I was wrong." Eleanor looked directly at me. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't see condescension or judgment in her eyes. I saw genuine remorse. Stephanie, you were everything this family needed, and I was too blinded by prejudice to see it. You brought Marcus love, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. While I was worried about maintaining our social status, you were worried about maintaining our humanity. She turned to Marcus. And you, my son, showed me what real family material looks like. It's not about protecting the family name. It's about making sure the family name is worth protecting. The room was quiet except for Emma's soft breathing, and the sound of Eleanor's quiet. Crying, "I've lost everything," Eleanor continued. My husband is in prison. My daughter won't speak to me. My social circle abandoned me the moment the FBI started asking questions. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment in Evanston, working part-time at a bookstore to pay rent. Good, Marcus said bluntly. Maybe now you understand what it feels like when your life gets turned upside down through no fault of your own. Eleanor nodded. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. But Emma doesn't deserve to grow up without knowing her grandmother. And I don't deserve to miss any more of her life. I looked down at my daughter, who was staring up at me with Marcus's gray eyes, completely trusting that I would make the right decision for her future. If you want to be part of Emma's life, I said slowly, you need to understand something. She's going to grow up knowing exactly what her father and I did to build the foundation. She's going to know that we chose justice over family loyalty, and she's going to be proud of that choice. I want her to be proud of it too, Eleanor said. And I want to help if you'll let me. Help how? Eleanor pulled out a folded piece of paper from her purse. I've been working with a family law attorney to establish a trust fund for Emma. It's not much, about $2 million from the sale of my jewelry and personal items, but I want it to be used for the foundation, specifically for educational scholarships for children from families affected by Wellington real estate. Marcus and I looked at each other in amazement. The Eleanor Wellington we'd known would never have sold her precious jewelry, let alone use the proceeds for charity. There's one condition, Eleanor continued. I want to volunteer for the foundation. I want to work directly with the families we hurt. I want to look them in the eye and apologize personally, and then I want to spend whatever time I have left making it right. Emma chose that moment to reach out her tiny hand toward her grandmother. Without thinking, Eleanor moved closer and let Emma's fingers wrap around her pinky. Hello, sweetheart, Eleanor whispered. I'm your grandmother, and I promise I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that title. I looked at Marcus, who was watching his mother hold his daughter's hand with an expression I couldn't quite read. She can volunteer for the foundation, I said finally, but she starts at the bottom. Filing paperwork, answering phones, whatever needs doing. No special treatment because she's Wellington. Thank you, Eleanor said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. Thank you for giving me a chance to be family material. As we sat there in our living room, Marcus, me, Emma, and the woman who had once told me I would never be good enough for her son, I realized that the story wasn't really about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving that families can change, that people can grow, and that sometimes the best way to honor your legacy is to completely transform it. 6 months ago, on Christmas Eve, Marcus had asked his family what they thought family material really meant. Tonight, holding our daughter while her grandmother promised to spend her life making amends, we finally had our answer. Family material isn't about money, social status, or maintaining appearances. It's about love, courage, and the willingness to tear down anything that's wrong to build something that's right. And as Emma fell asleep in my arms, surrounded by the people who loved her enough to change the world for her, I knew she would grow up understanding exactly what it means to be family material. The Wellington name would continue, but it would mean something entirely different for the next generation. It would mean justice. It would mean integrity, and it would mean that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to accept the way things have always been. Emma Rose Wellington would inherit that legacy, and I couldn't wait to see what she would build with it. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.